Supreme Commander Vree looked directly at the human delegation and said, "We have observed your kind for centuries, and your defiance is an insult to the order of the galaxy. As of right now, Earth is at war with the Empire." Jonathan Ford, Earth's appointed ambassador, stood in front of the human delegation with his sharp blue eyes fixed on the Emperor. The room was stuffy with the sound of alien machinery recycling air, and two of the humans were fidgeting nervously, but Ford stayed still, a picture of calm resolve. "War, you say?" Ford asked, his voice cutting through the heavy silence like a blade. The Empire's delegation was shocked, and Vree's mandibles clicked slightly, a sign of irritation among his kind. "Invincible is a fact, not an assumption. Humans, your world will fall in days, your people will kneel, and your resistance will be a distant memory." The tension in the room was palpable, and the alien diplomats looked at each other as if they were not used to seeing such brave defiance. For eons, the Galactic Empire had grown without any problems, and its reputation alone was enough to subjugate whole species. But here stood humanity, a species they had thought was primitive, daring to challenge their dominion. "Your arrogance will be your downfall, VRI," stepping closer and casting a shadow over Ford. The ambassador didn't flinch. "Do you have any idea of the forces that are against you? Your cute ideas of unity and resilience will crumble under the weight of our fleets." Ford's smile faded, and he fixed his face. People from other planets shouted angry things, and the translators had a hard time keeping up. VRI raised a clawed hand to silence his entourage. "You speak of lions and deer," he sneered. "Do you really believe your primitive metaphors hold meaning here? You will learn, Ambassador. Your world will learn." As the Supreme Commander turned to leave, Ford took a step forward, his voice ringing out. "Before you go, AP," he said, "humanity's history is written in battles we were never supposed to win. We faced extinction, annihilation, and despair, and yet here we stand. If you think we will fall easily, you haven't been paying attention." The alien delegation left in a swirl of robes and anger, their metallic footsteps reverberating down the hallway, leaving the humans in the silence of the empty chamber. A man with pale skin and trembling hands finally spoke. "Do you think they'll take us seriously?" Ford asked him. "They'll take us seriously soon enough." On the way back to Earth on the diplomatic vessel, the only sound was the hum of the engines. Ford sat alone in his quarters and stared out at the endless void of space. The stars seemed closer than ever, more foreboding him. His mind was filled with thoughts of what lay ahead. The Galactic Empire wasn't an idle threat. Its fleets were huge and technologically advanced, and they had destroyed many civilizations. But Ford knew that humanity's strength wasn't in its overwhelming force, but in its unbreakable spirit. When they arrived at Earth's orbital command station, they were greeted by General Marcus Steele, the grizzled leader of the Humanity Space Defense Forces. Steele's uniform was spotless, and he asked Ford how the meeting went. Ford shrugged as expected. Steele's brow furrowed, and he asked, "What do you think? Can we hold them off?" Ford looked directly into the general's eyes and said, "We can do more than hold them off. They'll come at us with everything they have and expect us to crumble. We have to show them they're wrong." The general nodded his head grimly and said, "Grim preparations are already underway. We've mobilized the fleet and done fortifying key positions. The first order of business has been pursued, but this won't just be a military fight. We'll need every ounce of ingenuity and resolve humanity has." "This is why they won't win," Ford said. "They think they're fighting a simple war that they've fought 100 times. They don't understand what it means to fight humans." As the two men walked through the busy halls of the station, Ford felt a surge of pride. Technicians, scientists, and soldiers moved with purpose, their faces set with determination. Earth was preparing for war not out of fear, but with resolve. Day brought together Earth's top leaders, each bringing their expertise to the table as strategies were discussed and plans laid out. Ford's mind drifted back to the Supreme Commander's parting words. The Galactic Empire believed in its superiority and its ability to crush any resistance, but Ford knew better. Humanity had been underestimated before; it would not happen again. The War Council convened in the heart of Earth's orbital command station, a vast room brimming with holographic displays and weapons. The hum of constant activity at the center stood General Marcus Steele, his imposing frame and stern demeanor commanding attention. His gaze swept over the gathered leaders, military officers, scientists, and strategists, all here to prepare humanity for its greatest challenge. To protect is not on our side, Steele began, his deep voice cutting through the low murmurs. The Galactic Empire won't wait. We estimate their first wave could arrive within weeks. We need to be ready. Ambassador Jonathan Ford leaned against the edge of the table, arms crossed. Their arrogance. They think this will be over quickly, but we're going to show them how wrong they are. The room was filled with determination. Humanity had faced many problems before, but this was the first time they had been in a war with an empire that stretched across the stars. There was no room for despair, only resolve. Colonel Ethan Drake, a wiry, strong man with sharp, calculating eyes, stepped forward and said, "I'll lead the Black Viper unit on a reconnaissance mission. We need information on their fleet composition and supply chains. Blind resistance is suicide." Steele nodded, but Drake's face couldn't be read. "You'll have what you need, but be warned, their security will be tight. Failure is never an option." The council left Ford and Steele alone at the central console. A holographic projection of Earth slowly rotated in front of them, showing tactical data. "Do you think we can win this?" Steele asked Ford. "Victory isn't guaranteed, but they don't realize how desperate we can be to get it. That's their mistake. On Earth, preparations were made quickly and steadily. Factories made advanced weapons and spaceships constantly, with production lines running day and night. Scientists worked feverishly to adapt existing technologies and come up with new ones that pushed the limits of human ingenuity. The air was filled with a sense of urgency as everyone got ready for the storm. Drake's Black Viper unit moved through space in a sleek, unmarked ship. The crew was made up of experts, each one a master of their craft. As they got closer to the edge of the Empire's territory, tension filled the cabin. One of Drake's agents said she spoke steadily. "Stay sharp, even though the stakes are high." Their mission was dangerous, going deep into enemy territory to... They looked at the Empire's huge fleets and found critical weaknesses like overstretched supply lines, vulnerable command ships, and an over-reliance on rigid protocols. When the team returned, they were hurt but successful, and Drake delivered their findings to the general. The general's eyes narrowed as he looked over the data. "They're strong but not unbeatable. We'll take advantage of every weakness." Back on Earth, Steele spoke to thousands of soldiers at a huge military base, his voice resonating across the vast field. "This is not a battle for survival, it's a battle for our future. The Galactic Empire thinks they can break us. Let's prove them wrong. Let's show them what it means to be human." The troops cheered, their resolve strengthened. As Ford watched from the sidelines, he felt a flicker of hope. Steele's ability to inspire was unmatched and a vital weapon in their arsenal. But Ford knew that inspiration alone wouldn't win the war. It would also take strategy, sacrifice, and a level of ruthlessness that humanity had rarely shown. As the first defensive stations were fortified and fleets deployed, Ford met Steele and Drake one last time before the battle began. The three men stood in the station's command center, watching the holographic map shift and pulse with incoming data. "We've done everything we can to prepare," Steele said. "Now it's up to them to us." Drake grinned, his confidence unshaken. "We'll hit them where it hurts. They won't know what hit them." Ford was speechless for a moment, his thoughts racing. They think this will be over quickly. They don't understand what they've awakened. The command center hummed with controlled chaos as final preparations were made across the station. Officers and technicians were tirelessly their focus, unwavering. The gravity of the situation hung heavy, but it also ignited a sense of purpose that spread like wildfire as Ford looked out at the planet below its surface, dotted with the lights of cities, and sent the glow of industry. He felt a swell of pride. Humanity was far from perfect, but it was resilient, resourceful, and unyielding in the face of annihilation. When the first sensors detected the approach of the Empire's fleet, the alarm sounded. Across the station, Steele barked orders, his voice cutting through the din. "They're here," he said simply. Drake's smile widened, an edge of exhilaration in his expression. "Good. Let's show them what they're dealing with." Ford remained at the command console, his mind sharp and focused. The pieces were in place, the preparations complete. Now came the test. "Let them come," he murmured to himself. Step 1, he thought. Hit the button. "We're ready," was written on the screen in Earth's orbital command station by General Marcus Steele, who looked stern but determined. The holographic display in front of him showed the enemy fleet moving forward, its size shocking even those who had seen it coming. "Here they come," Steele muttered, his voice low and steady. "Impressive show of force," Ambassador Jonathan Ford said, his tone tinged with irony. "Let's see how they handle a fight." Steele didn't answer. He was focused on the fleet, which was humanity's first line of defense. Dozens of battle cruisers and fighter squadrons that were smaller and less numerous than their enemies were lined up in defensive formations. Each ship was stocked with the newest weapons that humanity could muster. Blinding beams of plasma and streaks of missiles tore through space, aimed directly at the human fleet. Shields went up and Steele barked into his comms. Return fires came from the smaller human ships, and railguns roared as their hypersonic projectiles slammed into the Empire's warships. Experimental energy weapons let loose blinding bursts of light that cut through shields and holes alike. Fighter squadrons sped to the chaos, their pilots weaving through enemy fire with unmatched skill. Colonel Ethan Drake led one of these squadrons, telling them to stay tight and target their engines and weaponry. "We're not here to trade punches, we're here to kill them." Drake's fighter banked hard as an enemy interceptor screamed, and he fired. The interceptor exploded in a burst of fire and debris, but Drake didn't stay to watch. There wasn't time. Imperial troops had landed on one of Earth's outer colonies, their huge war machines trampling across the ground. The colony's defenders, who were outnumbered and outgunned, fought with a ferocity that surprised the invaders. Drake's counterpart on the ground, Captain Ryan Maddox, led the resistance. His voice cracked over the cowls as he told his soldiers to hit their flanks, use the terrain to your advantage, and don't give them a clear shot. Maddox's unit ambushed a column of Imperial walkers using anti-tank rockets and homemade explosives. The explosions lit up the night, and the walkers were crushed like tin cans. The colonists celebrated, but Maddox knew the fight was far from over. Back in orbit, Steele watched the battle with a mix of pride and tension. The Empire was holding its own, but the sheer size of the enemy force was overwhelming. The Empire ships started to change their formations, tightening their counterattacks and becoming more precise. Ford looked at Steele and asked, "What's going on?" Steele didn't answer. Instead, he watched as a group of smaller, faster ships broke away from the main fleet and darted toward the Empire's rear. These were Earth Saint frigates, which were equipped with cloaking technology and were designed to sabotage. They snuck past the Empire's defenses and targeted their supply ships and command vessels, causing explosions that destroyed important enemy resources. The Empire's lines faltered and their cohesion was briefly broken. "Keep them off balance on the battlefield," Steele said under his breath. But the cost was rising. Ford felt the weight of every report. He saw that humanity's forces were strong. They were fighting not for glory or quest, but for survival, which made them dangerous. Things started to turn when one of Earth's experimental weapons went live, a huge orbital cannon hidden on the dark side of the moon. When it fired its first shot, the beam of energy cut through space and hit one of the Empire's dreadnoughts, causing a huge explosion that sent its parts flying into space. Cheers broke out in the command center, but Steele quickly shut them down with a sharp gesture that said, "Focus, this isn't over the loss of their dreadnoughts." The Empire's fleet commander was furious, and he ordered his alien visage to push harder against humanity's defenses. Drake's squadron was in the middle of the chaos, and he dodged enemy fire with ease. Drake ignored the warning lights that flashed when an enemy cruiser's shields were hit by a bullet as he spotted an opening and dove toward it, skimming along its surface before detonating a payload of explosives. The cruiser buckled, sending flames spewing from its hull. Meanwhile, Maddox's forces launched a desperate counteroffensive using guerrilla tactics, attacking the Empire's supply lines and command posts. The invaders were relentless, but the colonists refused to give up. Ford watched the battle from the station, his mind racing with possibilities. He turned to Steele and said, "This can't go on forever. We need to force a decisive moment." Steele grimly agreed. "We lure their flagship into the kill zone. If we kill their commander, the rest will fall apart." Was set off, and humanity's fleet faked a retreat to bring the Empire's flagship into range of the orbital cannon. It was a risky move, but they had to take it. As the flagship moved into position, the cannon fired and the beam landed through space and hit the ship with unerring accuracy. The explosion was blinding, and for a moment, there was silence on the battlefield. Afterward, the Empire's fleet lost cohesion, their attacks broke down, and their formations fell apart. Steele saw an opportunity, and all ships pushed forward to drive them back. Humanity's forces surged, unshaken by the odds. For the first time in hundreds of years, the Empire was retreating. Ensouled his expression a mix of exhaustion and determination. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly. Ford nodded. "Good. Let them make sure they remember it." The remnants of the Galactic Empire's fleet hung in disarray, scattered across the vast expanse of space. Fires burned in the vacuum, the debris of once imposing warships drifting aimlessly. The stars, once a stage for their unchallenged dominance, now bore silent witness to their humbling defeat on the bridge of Earth Oral Command Station. General Marcus Steele stood amidst a fading tension, his hands gripping the edge of the console. The tactical display showed the fractured enemy fleet retreating, their formation shattered. Steele's gray eyes scanned the scene, his expression unreadable. "They falling back," a junior officer reported, her voice trembling with restrained excitement. "Hold position," Steele ordered, voice sharp and steady now. "Pursuit, not yet." Ambassador Jonathan Ford, leaning against the far wall, let out a slow breath. The lines of tension in his face softened, though his posture remained taut. "They didn't expect this," he said quietly, "for the first time in centuries. They've been forced to retreat, but this isn't the end." Steele glanced at him. "No, it's not. They'll regroup, they'll come back stronger, and so will we." "For," replied his voice, firm across Earth. News of the victory spread like wildfire. Cities erupted in celebration, their streets filled with people cheering and waving banners. Factories continued to churn out weapons and supplies, their workers reinvigorated by the taste of triumph. The battle had been a costly one, but it had proven humanity's resilience. Colonel Ethan Drake returned to the station with his Black Viper unit, their ship scarred but intact. The squadron fighters docked aides applause from ground crews who saluted the returning pilots. Drake stepped out of his cockpit, his flight suit streaked with soot, and gave a weary smile to the crowd. "Don't cheer too loud," he said. "We've still got work to do." Drake's return was followed by Captain Ryan Maddox's transmission from the ground. His The defenders of the colonies had successfully pushed back the Empire's forces, with their guerrilla tactics working better than anyone had hoped. Maddox, whose face was streaked with grime, gave his report with quiet pride. "The colony is safe for now, but we're short on supplies and morale is hanging by a thread. If they come back, we'll need reinforcements, and Steele promised you'll get them. You've done more than hold your ground, Captain. You've given us a foothold while humanity regrouped." Ford and Steele met with the Empire's top strategist, saying that the victory had bought them time, but it was clear that the war was far from over. The Empire's retreat was tactical. It was more of a regrouping than a surrender. "We need to press our advantage," Drake said, his voice carrying the edge of someone who had stared death in the face and lived. Ford and Steele met with the Empire's top strategist, saying that the victory had bought them time, but it was clear that the war was far from over. "We need to press our advantage," Drake said. It was more of a regrouping than a surrender. "We need to press our advantage," Drake said, turning to his followers. Steele shook his head. Ford, who was watching the exchange, finally spoke. "We don't just need to win battles. We need to change the rules of the game. They rely on fear and intimidation to keep their empire together. If we can shatter that image and make it clear they're not invincible, we'll do more than win. We'll inspire rebellion across their territories." The room went silent as the weight of his words hit home. People had always fought to stay alive, but now they had the chance to do something bigger, threat the very foundations of the Galactic Empire. As plans were made for the next phase, factories sped up production of ships and weapons at a rate that had never been seen before. Scientists worked hard to improve their technology, while engineers figured out how to use alien equipment they had captured. Steele visited one of the station's observation decks and saw the vastness of space. Ford joined him, and his footsteps echoed through the quiet. "They'll come back," Steele said, not turning around as they always do for an answer. For a moment, the two men stood in silence, the weight of their responsibilities pressing down on them. Then Steele spoke again, this time in a softer voice. "Do you ever wonder if this is worth it? If we're capable of building something better, or if we're just delaying the inevitable?" Ford looked at him thoughtfully. "It's not about guarantees. It's about giving people a chance. A chance to fight to survive, to hope that's worth everything." Steele nodded, but doubt lingered in his eyes. When the Empire launched its next offensive, humanity was ready. Their fleets met the enemy head-on, using tactics perfected from countless simulations and the hard-learned lessons of the first battle. Drake's Black Viper led the attack. On the ground, Maddox's forces launched coordinated attacks that destroyed key defenses and cut off supply lines. Regular people joined the fight, and their determination turned the tide in battles that might have been lost otherwise. The war was brutal, and every victory came at a heavy cost in lives. But with each battle, the Empire's facade grew thinner, and rumors of their defeat inspired other species to rise up. In the last few days of the campaign, humanity launched an all-out attack on the Empire's central command. It was a desperate move that relied on a mix of daring ingenuity and sheer willpower. Drake's squadron provided cover for the main fleet, and Ford led the attack from the command center. When the Empire's command structure finally fell, the galaxy held its breath for the first time in millennia. The unassailable had been attacked, and the invincible had been defeated. Humanity's forces returned home to a hero's welcome, and cities erupted in celebration as their people came together in a way that went beyond borders and differences. In the quiet aftermath, Ford and Steele stood on the observation once more. The stars seemed brighter now, less foreboding. "We did it," Steele said, his voice tinged with disbelief. Ford nodded, "For now, but the real work starts here." Steele looked at him with a faint smile on his lips, always the optimist. He replied, "Just believe in what we can be." As they looked out into the endless expanse of space, the future seemed full of possibilities. Humanity had faced the darkness and come out stronger, ready to make its own destiny. The Galactic Empire's defeat had tipped the scales in favor of freedom for the first time in hundreds of years. Steele stood still on the observation deck, his eyes fixed on the shimmering void behind him. The station was alive with activity, with engineers fixing broken ships, soldiers telling stories of hard-fought victories, and diplomats getting ready for the monumental task of rebuilding alliances. The war had been brutal, but it had made humanity stronger. Commander Ford walked into the room, his steps firm and deliberate. The younger man carried the same weight as Steele, but his eyes burned with a fierce, unwavering energy. Ford said that the last of the Empire ships had pulled back beyond the system, and they wouldn't be coming back anytime soon. Steele didn't turn, but he said quietly, "They will, or someone else will, power." Ford smirked slightly as he stood next to him and looked out at the vastness. "Maybe," he replied, "but we've done more than win a war. We've shown the galaxy that the Empire isn't unbeatable and that resistance isn't futile." Steele looked at him, but his expression couldn't be read. "You think it's enough? You think that shattered fleets and scattered rebellions will hold?" he asked. "I think it's a start. People are fighting back not because they think they'll win today, but because they believe tomorrow can be different, and that's because of a Steele exhaled. It's a heavy burden, hope, easy to spark, hard to maintain. Good thing we're not afraid of hard work for it," he said in a firm voice. "We fought for survival. Now it's time to fight for something bigger, for a galaxy that doesn't bow to tyrants." As the enormity of their task hit them both, Steele straightened his back and said, "If they come back, we'll be ready. And if anyone else dares to try, they'll learn the same lesson the Empire did. Humanity doesn't break." Ford nodded his head firmly and said, "No, we don't." They all turned back to the command center. The future was big and scary, but that's how humanity's story will go. It was just starting.